This is Pamela Kuhn, and the curtain is up on Center Stage, the show about the arts and the artists behind their work. There are thousands of pianists in the world. So what does it take for one to rise to the top and stand out in this competitive market of classical music? I feel that the main element to succeed in the world of the performing arts today is the ability to own your talent, be authentically true to yourself, and have artistic control over every move that you make. Well, my guest today has that ability, and she moves with a touch of aquiline magic in her step. I am speaking of Asiya Korepanova. Russian by birth, she made the decision to make the U.S. her home at the invitation of her teacher, Santiago Rodriguez, from the University of Miami. Asiya has the most engaging presence. She seems to have it all. She is physically beautiful with long red hair, which reminds me of the Lady Galadriel from Lord of the Rings. And then there are the YouTube videos, not only of her performances, but of her complete dedication to communicating with her audience in colorful explanations of her art and performance ideas. She also produces artwork, which seems to inhabit a force of its own that emanates from her own creative process. I found myself wrapped up in the Asiya Korepanova halo. And now I take pleasure in introducing her today on Center Stage. Asiya, welcome to Center Stage. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me. Hello.
This is a real treat. I mean, do you think that I'm right when I say you do remind me of Lady Galadriel from Lord of the Rings?
Well, it's a compliment.
How many people have said that to you? I'm just wondering.
I wouldn't say a lot of people, but there were instances for sure, yes.
Well, you are special, and you do have this goddess-like appearance and aura about you. Oh, I'm just praising you too much, aren't I?
Yes. I'm going to blush too much now.
Well, okay, so I want to know, through my intro, I talked about what sets apart so many pianists from others. I mean, it is very difficult out there. It's incredibly competitive now. And what is it, in your opinion, that really designates an artist at the keyboard as extraordinary?
There are many factors indeed, but I believe an ability to find your own ideas in the music, find what is it about them, formulate them, and being able to communicate them, which it sounds cliche, I understand, like find your voice and things like that, but it really is a very deep idea, because what's beautiful about classical music is it's so rich. In any area, in any era of music, would that be a Baroque music, classical music, romantic, impressionistic, 20th century, late 20th century, the palette of things that we have to ourselves is so vast that it allows us to find something unique. And no two performances can be the same. No two performances of the same artist can be the same. And musical text, the better the music, the more views it allows, I believe. Mm-hmm. Of course, we can be people who, view things from only one particular perspective, such as, purely authentic performances of Baroque music, only on Baroque instruments and things like that. But at the same time, as the time goes by and the music that is already written reflects all of the history that passes since it was written, mm-hmm. It absorbs it. It allows us to bring always something else, with our understanding of the world today, with our vision of the world today, with the instruments that inevitably change, because even in the last 100 years, the way piano changed as an instrument is dramatic. If you compare Steinway that is made today with the Steinway that was made 100 years ago, there's a drastic difference in color and in different qualities. So it all allows us always to strive to find our own sound, to strive to find our own style.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is the most important thing, to really understand your place in each piece that you're doing. Plus, it gets more and more difficult with time, especially since the beginning of the recording as a concept. More people now play instruments than I don't know, 100 years ago.
It's true. Yeah.
And more recordings are being done every year, and people compare each other and compare themselves to others, compare as listeners, 2, 3, 5, 50 people between each other. And it creates sort of, in my opinion, a danger of trying to please anyone's taste, because like, I want to be as good as XYZ, or I don't want to be behind of XYZ. And because of that, there is a danger of kind of find yourself in a sort of unified type of thinking and performance. And sometimes it can be scary to make, one step to the right, one step to the left, and introduce something else, because you don't know how it's going to be received. But I believe the performers of the past, whatever instrument it is, could be piano or violin or voice or whatever, we can recognize them by their unique style that they're playing, by their unique sound, by the way they phrase, by the way they tailor the repertoire and things like that. And I think that is one of the most important things to remember, is to really always remember who you are before starting to compare yourself to someone else.
There's no question about that. It's one thing I tell all my singers: you must know yourself. To thine own self be true. And it means so many different things, doesn't it? Because you've really nailed it. As young artists, everybody's trying to either sound like someone, or they're trying to fit into that unified idea. And I understand from what I read about you early on, because you started at age 4 at the piano with your wonderful mother, who was a marvelous pianist herself, teaching you.
Yes.
And your father teaching you to read orchestral clefs by the time you were 6, I think.
Yeah.
Wow. So, and I find that reading about you, you really had a very determined voice, even when you were young, which left you to be a little misunderstood by the time you got to Moscow Conservatory. Am I correct?
Yes.
You were standing out. You weren't one of the unified souls.
Not only I was having kind of early start, I also was one of the maybe earliest examples in my country of people who were homeschooled. Now, someone who's homeschooled, especially in the United States, so many people decide to homeschool their children. It's not really like something special. But back in Russia in the late 80s, early 90s, it was virtually unheard of. And my mother, there were some family circumstances leading to that. It wasn't just a decision like, oh, she's not going to go to school. There were some other circumstances, but ultimately, I didn't go to kindergarten. I didn't go to any kind of institutions before I was 10. And all the knowledge that I was able to get, I was doing at home. And I was pretty free in absorbing whatever I wanted. My parents were always very active, and my mother was practicing a lot and preparing to her own recitals. I was told that at about age 3, I was trying to push her out of the piano and practice myself, which ultimately led her to start giving me lessons, because she and my dad, they not necessarily thought of me as a next generation musician in the family. The musicians having tough times oftentimes, and they didn't think that, oh, she's going to be a pianist or she's going to be this or that. But what happened was, because I was so free and I was a very curious person, and I also was a hyperactive child, which meant that my mother was always finding activities to kind of give me to do once I would be, bored with something. So I became very artistic very early through being hyperactive, and I was, drawing, reading, standing on my head, playing, and doing all those things. But I started reading quite early and found great joy in doing so, and very quickly arrived to very serious literature. And I know it sounds like a little bit bizarre anecdote right now, but I read Divine Comedy, for instance, when I was 7. I loved it so much. I read it second time. I drew pictures for it. It was so fun. And then with all these things, I arrived to school when I was 10. I already read everything that was in the literature program until end of the school. And not everyone was comfortable with that.
Yeah.
And I was sitting in the, history of art, a little bit like this, because I already knew what the teacher was telling about. I don't know, we were in the 4th grade. I remember we were going through, ancient Greece and Roman culture, and I knew it all. And I was sitting aggravated because of all of a lot of nudity in Greek and Roman art. Everyone was just giggling and making jokes. And, I felt, oh, these people do not look at the art. They just look at naked bodies and making fun of them. And I was very upset. So it was a bizarre experience, like clash of kind of being over prepared in a sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And another thing, I simply didn't have much of social skills to be around a lot of people. Right. So and I grew up mainly hanging out with friends of my parents and talking with them on the same level. So it was a little bit new. I mean, very new, but a little bit bizarre for me to find myself around a lot of kids and companies, and the concept of this group work. It was tough time, and it took me a while to adjust.
I can imagine.
Which inevitably brought social problems for me, and that I had to learn to overcome over time. So
here are the pros and cons of homeschooling and finding your own voice. Wow, and what a voice you had from early on. I mean, this is pretty marvelous. I have a feeling a lot of my listeners would support the homeschooling and letting you discover life in your own pace and not someone else's curriculum. Mm-hmm. I think this is fantastic. So tell me about those conservatory years. I mean, it sounds a bit crazy. You were misunderstood a lot, your talent, but yet you knew who you were. So was that one of the things that catapulted you to America in an endeavor to really be able to practice having your own belief system and playing and interpretations, etc.?
In general, yes. I would say that again, stepping back a little bit to my childhood, I grew up listening to a lot of music in my own for my own pleasure. I never was that much interested or drawn to listening to piano recordings growing up, but I was absolutely obsessed with symphonic repertoire and chamber music repertoire and operas and like big scale pieces, which led me to kind of trying to emulate that orchestral and big scale sound in what I was doing on the piano. which not always was understood or
Right.
appreciated. And I
Right.
understand when I was, I don't know, 17, 18, and just growing up, I might have been doing things that were a little bit outrageous, or I was overdoing things. But ultimately, now, so many years later, I find myself, transcribing symphonies for piano solo, and it definitely stems from that time. And I am happy that I have this interest, because it's a true joy, and it's an incredible type of activity to do. But I often was told that I'm way too expressive, that I'm trying to bring too much into music. I'm trying to.
Mhm.
Uh, the first group of transcendental etudes that I was playing, probably I was, I don't know, maybe 17 years old or something like that. I was told by my teacher at the time, "You're not playing Liszt, you're playing late Bruckner and yourself."
Ah, okay. Okay.
And she felt that I'm making this music sound way too profound and way too deep for what she thought it was. And I definitely am standing on my own feet now, and I'm standing on my ground. And I believe that if you hear depth in music, it is something that you need to bring to the table, not conceal. And if you are able to hear that, you can bring it, because if you want something more light and more, maybe not as profound, there's always somebody else. There's always anyone else who would like to portray it in a different way. So when I started playing Transcendental Etudes as a recital program, I was 19, 19, turning 20 when I got the whole set. And I felt they are tone poems for piano.
Mhm.
I always thought that, okay, Liszt has tone poem called Mazeppa, which is built on the same tune and the same motif and roughly same shape as the Mazeppa Transcendental Etude. And with that connection, I was heavily listening to all of the Liszt's actual orchestral tone poems,
Right.
and Faust and Dante Symphony, and I felt this is what the etudes supposed to sound like,
Mhm.
not like an enhanced exercise or just a encore piece, but something really, really colorful and multi-layered, and having many planes to that. So with time, it just became second nature for me. And after I came to United States and started studying with Professor Santiago Rodriguez, he at some point said, "Why don't you add another 12 etudes to your transcendental etudes program? That would be so much fun." Actually, he first suggested that I add Paganini etudes.
Ah.
And I was like, wow, that's a crazy thought. But then I started thinking, like, because transcendental etudes are typically played as a single half of recital, if
Mhm.
not just a recital. I'm like, okay, transcendental etudes are an hour plus few minutes, and then Paganini etudes are 21, 22. That's a very imbalanced
Oh,
to
yeah.
have. Then I started thinking, like, what do I add to Paganini etudes? And I started thinking, okay, I played lots of opera fantasies by Liszt. I could add something not by Liszt. And the more I thought, the more I realized, there are yet 6 more Liszt etudes. So I I came back to my teacher and I said, I'm thinking, like, I was thinking for so long, and I don't know what to add to that. And I realized there's not a 6 etudes. It's like, well, you're crazy, but go ahead.
I like the crazy part. I think that's good. I think you're onto something there. And you put the word transcendental on any piece, and suddenly we've gone to another world. And it looks to me like you're going for a sense of cohesiveness and a cycle. And this is something that appeals to me very much as a singer, because I love the art of song cycles, because one piece is dependent on the one, that follows. And there's
Part of the
story.
line, yeah.
Yeah, there's a story that's told. But before we go any further, we have to announce to everyone that you are performing these on February 21st at 8 p.m. at Merkin Hall in New York City. Now, you have performed these as a complete set before,
Yes.
I believe, many times.
Yes.
Yeah, with the extra 6.
With the extra 6, it makes 24, exactly, yes.
It's fantastic. Talk to me about the physicality that goes into this, Asiya.
When I just started putting this program together, it definitely felt that this is the hardest thing in the world. First performances of it that I've done, which were even made before I made a public performance. So, I played it for my teacher, I played it for my friends before going on stage. And I love to share an anecdote about my very, very first playing. I invited dear friends. I was still a University of Miami student. This was actually my artist diploma final program. And I invited friends of mine, reserved a room in the university. There were like 5 people in there. I played them in an order and got up, bowed to them, and then I realized I cannot turn any direction because the back of my neck and back of my back got completely like strained, and I was so scared. We went to have dinner, and I was just like, oh, I need to go home and take an Epsom salt bath and relax and see what's going on, whether I like
Oh my gosh.
wrecked my back completely or what.
Oh my gosh.
So I went home, took Epsom salt bath, which is very helpful, by the way, and always helps with relaxing muscles and things like that. Went to bed early, slept for many hours, got up, stretched a little bit, took the next day easy. In the evening, practiced a little bit. Then the following day, woke up feeling fine, practiced very well, and yet next day did this run again for another group of people.
Oh my gosh.
And nothing happened to my back second time.
Okay. That's
so
helpful.
It's very interesting how our bodies are incredible in adjusting quickly to the demands that we put them, if we do that in a kind of thoughtful and controlled way. So, it's always this program is very good workout. still remains one, but it's also, the more you play anything, the more comfort you get. And at this point, I'm at the point where I enjoy discovering new ideas on stage with it, because the core interpretation and the core way I'm playing this has been set a long time ago. But I love being flexible and finding where my thought will, or my inspiration will lead me. And there've been many moments since my very first performance where I would be on stage playing very familiar part of a very familiar etude that I practiced for I don't know how many 100 hours by this point, and suddenly in a very familiar phrase I feel a perspective or a color that I've never thought is possible before, I never noticed. And that is that is the biggest joy for me, because it's again, it's never the same. There's always something new. And I even have a little notebook where if I discover something particularly striking on stage, I write it down. It's like, oh, I heard this felt like this felt like this, and this particular performance. I have a little collection of stage discoveries. It's very
Oh, I love that.
That's very intriguing. to me, myself.
I mean, that could eventually be your own book issue. I love that. Is that where your art comes from? Is it those little discoveries, or has art just been so embedded in you from the beginning that, in your own mind's eye, you're fascinated with the visual?
You're talking about visual art?
Mm-hmm.
Yes and no. The artwork comes from an overall kind of distant view of the piece. It's not necessarily something that comes from fine details.
Mm-hmm.
But again, we all have our own unique view of music. And I think one of the biggest challenges for a musician is to being just able to portray exactly on stage what you think this needs to sound like.
Mm-hmm.
And there are, of course, elusive parts of that are very hard to capture. But if you abstract yourself from sound and think, oh, what if I describe that in words? And that's how poetry comes to place. You're trying to write down this one way of association,
Mm-hmm.
or you're writing down in a visual form another form of association, and those can change over time as well. So it's all
It's all just part of it.
very
Mhm.
intertwined and very
I love that. But
uh,
I gather that we can buy your visual art online.
well, there are some pieces that I have available. I have an Etsy store, and where there are some of my piano transcriptions, scores of my piano transcriptions are
Okay.
available.
Okay.
There are a few larger pieces in color that belong actually not to Liszt, but to late piano cycle of Tchaikovsky, an album Opus
Interesting.
72. Uh, the artwork for Liszt is all ink. It's very, very fine, not very big artwork, but the artwork for Tchaikovsky is mixed techniques, a lot of color, a lot of bigger scale thinking.
Isn't
So
that interesting?
yeah.
Are you a synesthete yourself? Do you see notes and words and
No,
numbers in colors?
no, no, no.
Interesting. Interesting. I love this aspect about you. You seem, I talked about the Asiya halo in my intro. And I believe that you do have something extraordinarily special and seriously in a goddess-like fashion. You are more than just a musician, is what I'm trying to say. So, anyway, look, we wish you all the best for February 21st at Merkin Hall, and I'm going to wish you all the best for the rest of your career because I think it's going to be long lasting and rather extraordinary. And I look forward to all the visual artwork too. but but I want to get back to Liszt a little bit. I want you to tell me why you were drawn to his work. I mean, this was a composer. His music was as amazing and knew no boundaries as he was good looking. And what was it that spoke to you about this composer, Asya?
Um, it's a long road. In the very beginning, when I was playing my very first piece by Liszt, it was his own transcription of his own song Lorelei.
Ah,
I was
uh-huh.
probably, I don't know, 10 or something when I was
Hmm.
playing that.
Hmm.
And it was just a colorful piece and something that my teacher suggested me to take. Later on, I was playing some of his rhapsodies and some of his operatic fantasies. And in when I was 12, 13, 14, that kind of journey started for me. And I have to say, in the beginning, I did not enjoy that at all. To me, at the time, a list was, as for many other people, who, when you hear from about something from outside without,
Hmm.
you know, diving deep, you may uh, adopt someone else's vision without checking it very well. So I was somebody who wanted to play late Brahms, a 12, 13-year-old wanting to play late Brahms. It sounds a little comical, but that's what I was. I wanted to play late Brahms. I wanted to play, Bach. I wanted to play Beethoven. I wanted to play Schubert, and that to me was the music in its essence. I wanted to play German classics, in general. And Liszt was an unknowing obligation for me at the time.
Okay.
It was something, you're supposed to play something virtuosic and make a lot of noise and fuss, everyone claps and gives you a first prize at the competition. It was literally an attitude like that, because I was suggested very firmly that I need to add more virtuosic and more showy showcase pieces into repertoire. And I was protesting a lot. Actually, before I ever played a big piece by Liszt, I played Bach Busoni Chaconne.
Oh, yeah.
And when I was learning it, I was crying my eyes out. I thought Busoni destroyed Bach's original and made it sound so superficial and so, wrote so many notes that do not belong there. So I was extremely snobbish and this and that. But as I was progressing through Liszt's output and learned Mozart's both Mozart fantasies and for Marriage of Figaro and Don Giovanni, and I started to appreciate how it really depends on you how you play it. You can play it in the Mozartian style and very lightly, or you can play it in gargantual style with lots of muscle, and it becomes just superficial and showcasey. And there were Liszt sonatas at some point, and Schubert transcriptions. And at some point, I just realized that I was terribly wrong. And by the time I started learning the transcendental etudes, it was a little bit backwards for me. So I played a bunch of much bigger pieces before I ever, tackled any of the etudes. So I arrived to the etudes with already quite a baggage of knowing him as a composer and already knowing his works in other genres. And when you know things like, I don't know, his Requiem, for instance, his masses that not many people know, but it gives you tremendously different perspective on everything else. Know his late works that are just quiet and bizarre and transcendent in completely different way. So that understanding of him being a person who's able to do so many different things, of course, being very advantageous and very, flamboyant and very flashy and attractive, but also extremely deep, extremely fearless in what he wants on the instrument. And extremely fearless in, tackling all 9 Beethoven symphonies and making them available for pianists to play by themselves. Not in a sense of like easy piano reduction, but like full-blown piece, Berlioz Symphony Fantastique, and things like that. So the more you know, and the more you understand that he was a performing artist up to his like late 30s only. He didn't really perform after that, but he composed for a long time, and he ended his life in a very different place from where he started as an artist. He became a very extremely religious and extremely spiritual, and you can also hear that in his music. So multifaceted approach of his to everything he was doing was very inspiring, and I learned a lot from him as a transcriber as well. And
Yeah, I bet.
I haven't played so many transcriptions of his and fantasies of his. Who knows? Maybe I would never feel like, okay, I'm gonna do Manfred Symphony or Ein Heldenleben or any other things that
Right.
I've done.
Right. And you are known for that transcription of Ein Heldenleben, one of my favorite pieces in the world. Yeah.
Oh.
You and your symphonic prowess. I can't help but think that's something you inherited from your father as the composer that he was, and the way he introduced music to you. I mean, kind of fearlessly, as you said before, orchestrally, which is really fascinating. I love it. So you speak in your website. You have been referred to as a pianistic powerhouse. Those are two really huge words, and it seems to me, Asiya, that a lot of women now are going into this realm of a really bold statement about their playing, not only just deeply and spiritually, but physically. Is this something that's become important for women in representing themselves at the keyboard?
Um, it is a very good question. Thank you so much. I never thought of myself as an artist in any sort of gender ever.
Mm-hmm.
And it's important that these matters are now being spoken about and, supported throughout the world, and more opportunities are given to people. But to be very, very honest, I never thought about myself or for myself in these categories. I was just trying to do things that I found interesting or inspiring or challenging.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I cannot say that the projects that I do and the ideas that I arrive to are taken purely for the way they look on paper or being impressive or things like that.
Mm-hmm.
They rather parts of my natural area of interest,
Mm-hmm.
and therefore I know that there's always in any area of the world, not just in music, there's always, a first person who did that, or first person who did this, or first woman who was in space, or first man who was, in the marine, in the deep, the deepest part of the sea. So the human tendency of striving to be the first in any area of life is always there, and it's beautiful because it's a sign of progress, and that's how we develop as a society and as a humanity. But I think that I definitely compare myself always to what I was able to do, I don't know, a year ago or two years ago,
Right,
3 years
right.
ago.
Yeah.
And so indeed, growing up, I had, people that I admired, such as Martha Argerich, for
Oh,
instance,
yes.
or Myra Hess, or, Tatiana Nikolaeva and Maria Greenberg, and many, Annie Fisher, the many female pianists that left such an incredible legacy. But I don't know, and I think it's also a sign of where I was born and at what time, because I wasn't necessarily thinking of gender problems growing up and learning to do what I do, and
Mm-hmm.
I think it's also a sign of our times that these problems are much more vivid, not necessarily vivid as the problem is more vivid, but like the understanding of representation and things like that are more spoken
Mm-hmm.
about right now, and it is definitely different from my upbringing when I was a young child and
Of
a
course.
teenager or something like that. Yeah.
That's excellent. So, talk to me about your midnight pieces.
Hmm. Midnight Pieces is a self-indulgent fun project
I love that.
primarily. So originally I conceived it because I was looking at how everyone in any area of instrumentation is fascinated with encore pieces that are primarily technically spectacular. And don't mind me saying that because I have a bunch of encore pieces in my repertoire that are very technical and spectacular. But I also felt like there's so much music that is breathtakingly beautiful that nobody knows about.
Yeah.
And I thought to make a project in which I will be playing beautiful pieces that are rather calm, and created a system, divided them in 4 categories. There would be pieces by very well-known composers that a regular audience doesn't know. I don't know, piano pieces by Bruckner, for instance. And, things that like you would not think about. Then there would be very well-known pieces by very well-known composers to, cut them a slack as well, such as, I don't know, Claire de Lune and things like that.
Yeah.
But then pieces that belong to Russian composers that are much less known outside of Russia, which is, music by Lyadov, QE, and people like that, Kabalevsky, and then I gave a little bit of space for myself for my own transcriptions of short, beautiful songs and things like, I don't know, I did a transcription of a song by Amy Beach and by Alban Berg and by Mussorgsky and by, different composers. And no 2 composers repeat. So it's one piece by a composer. And I really enjoyed receiving feedback from people who were making these discoveries for themselves, and they like, oh, I didn't know this composer, or I didn't know this piece exists, and that would kind of spark their curiosity to hear more music of that composer, or try to play, if they play piano, try to find more opportunities for them just to play that for themselves. And it became, out of my own indulgence, it became almost like a slightly educational project and an inspirational project. And I'm very happy that it turned that way, because it is awesome when you can not push somebody, but give an example to somebody else to do their own thing. And then I think it's very, very important.
How beautiful. It is beautifully framed, and how touching. I love that. Wonderful, wonderful. Tell me, Asiya, in a perfect world, and if you could be the architect of it, how would you map out classical music for the coming years? Would you have like a nirvana idea of how we could live within classical music? I mean, I feel it changing a little bit. I feel the shifts. Of course, everything changes. But if you were the architect, how would you lead it?
In recent years, I was doing a lot of outreach projects in different institutions, in schools and colleges, and in a lot of different places throughout my travels. It started in a very interesting way. My first year at the University of Miami, I went to Shreveport, Louisiana, to Nina Weidman piano competition, and I was fortunate to become a gold medalist at that competition. Beautiful competition, because first it has a very long legacy. Last year was its 50th installation, but it comes not with just a monetary prize, but it comes with a bunch of concerts throughout the country, which allows you to instantly explore many states and make new connections and introduce people to what you do. And as I started, I embarked on my tour with those concerts. The competition director at the time, Lester Center Wilson, she would go with all of the contestants to these travels to present them, to make sure they're comfortable and all of that. And so in one of our first trips, there was I was playing at the piano conference in Jackson, Mississippi, and she said, would you mind, like, we have this wonderful school in the area, they have like in-depth art subjects in there. Would you want to come and speak to the kids, maybe play a little bit? And I said, yes, sure, but it was kind of last minute thing, and I didn't really have a lot of time to think what I'm going to talk about, like what I'm going to present. And also, as we were driving there, I realized that my audience is elementary kids. Like they're very, very, very tiny. And we walk into the room, there's like this big kind of conference type room, but bare floors with carpet, and some 200 kids, just like 7 to 10 sit on the floor and look at me.
Wow.
And I was just like absolutely terrified. First of all, it was my second year in the country. Okay. I was not, as comfortable as like going for any type of conversation right away. So I was a bit scared, and I'm staying there. I'm like, oh my God, what I'm going to do. And I thought, okay, I'm just going to play for them whatever it is in my evening program for the conference, because I had nothing else to come up with out of just being put on the spot, so to speak.
Right.
And so I started my performance for them with Balakirev's Islami fantasy, which is extremely technically difficult and very flashy, but also very beautiful, and has many different themes and sections. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to tell them that it's based on a folk tune, which is true, and to tell them that the form of the piece has the like quieter middle. And I just gave them something to anticipate, and then I played. And as I started playing, I noticed that this audience of 200 kids, and then imagine they're all little, and there was a lot of rustling and he and all that kind of stuff going on. And as I was playing, it became quieter and quieter and quieter and quieter. As I finished, they were like looking at me like this. And I was so amazed, because I expected them to get tired or confused or whatever. They were just blown away. And it was done on a very tiny upright. It was not a big or any wonderfully shaped instrument. It was very, very simple, but I just gave them the best I could of what I have with me. I played for them Ravel's Undine. I played the Islami. I played for them a little bit of Bach, a little bit of Beethoven. I described to them what the variations are, what is the concept of prelude and fugue. And so in short, half an hour, they had a glimpse of 4 different styles of music and some information about it. And then in the following hour, we went to an art class where kids were drawing, and the organizers thought it would be cool if I played something and they drew. And I repeated the Undine for them and told them the story behind the Aloysius Bertrand poem. And it again was such a special experience. Eventually, this experience led me to establishing my own nonprofit organization called Music for Minds. And I became a believer of going to kids into their spaces, and instead of trying to simplify concepts for them and explaining, kind of like going down on their level, and so like, oh, this is that, speaking to them as if they are adults and presenting them with the musical material of the highest level and highest intensity. And they respond to that very well, because if you think about it, they deal with computer games that are very colorful, very loud, very engaging. They deal with cartoons and movies that are very loud, very engaging, very overwhelming visually and audially and everything. So they have already very, very high standard of stimulation from all those things. And if classical musicians come in and think like, oh, kids would not probably understand, I don't know, late Rachmaninoff or Scriabin or something like that, they're wrong, because if you are going full blown with all of the emotional and sound effect that you can produce to them, that makes them pay attention and think, oh my God, this is actually amazing. And there were so many times where I played in just regular schools for middle school kids or high school kids, and they would come back and say, oh my God, I was taking piano lessons and I quit a few years ago because I was so bored. I had no idea this can sound like this. I'm going to go back. And when somebody walks to you and says that, you get chills, because you feel my mission is fulfilled. This is something. So we can talk about reorganizing the way classical music is presented in concert halls, thinking about different highest level outcomes. But I think in ideal world, if I could do a change, I would make sure that music is taught very seriously, with music theory and with introduction of kids to the highest classical music examples from early on. If you read biographies of some of the greatest minds of our world, almost majority of them are amateur players.
Yes.
We can talk about Einstein, who played violin, but the list is very, very long.
It's true. Yeah.
And people were playing chamber music. They were spending their time engaging in this kind of world. And it really changes who you are.
That's right.
If I were to make that change, I would make sure music education starts early on, and it continues throughout high school for everyone, and not being diluted or simplified or presented as elective or something, because it teaches you a pure form of peace and beauty. And when there's nothing left in this life, there's always music.
That's right. Beautifully put, Asiya. I like your ideal world going forward. I like it. I'll support that. Oh boy. Okay, and bravo to you for your non-for-profit. That's absolutely fantastic. Wonderful. Let me ask you this. I know you said on your website that you're very proud of where you live outside of Boston, and there was an inference in it that you could make music 24/7 where you live. And that also tells me that maybe at one point you lived in a little apartment where you couldn't do that. So is there great joy in where you live? And why have you chosen Boston?
Well, Boston was chosen because my husband got a job opportunity there, and it was picked primarily because of that. I finished my studies at the University of Miami in 2017, and I was pretty much free to go anywhere I wanted. We ultimately thought we want to go up north. And among the opportunities that we had were places like Chicago and Boston, and we thought Boston is a little milder. We also drawn for the age of this, one of the oldest cities in the country, and so many cultural opportunities that are here, and universities, and just beautiful area. And so that's how we picked it. Most of the people in Russia live in apartment buildings. We have much less the percentage of private homes comparing to apartment buildings is much smaller. So indeed, my entire life leading up to my moving to United States, I always lived in apartments, and there were neighbors who would be beating with their hammer on the
wall. Mm-hmm.
on the wall or on the heating system. And I am a pathological nighttime practicer. So, like, if you want to see me in the form of a kid in a candy shop, let me do an all-nighter.
I love it.
That is something that I really enjoy. I hope University of Miami forgives me for my misbehavior as a student, because I oftentimes would hide in a practice room past the time that the building would be locked, and would practice through the night into the morning and then sneak out. So
Somehow I'm not surprised. I like this. I like this.
yeah, so now being a homeowner and in a quiet suburb surrounded by a lot of forest, I'm a very happy camper here, because I can practice any time of day throughout our many years together. My husband learned to sleep virtually through anything. So
That's
I can practice my list, and he can watch his seventh dreams.
That,
Works spectacularly.
that is fantastic. And so now you are a U.S. citizen. Congratulations on that. I just have to ask an obvious question right now, and I've interviewed so many Russian artists. What is it like for you to look back at your country now? I know there is so much unrest in the world, and I'm not just speaking politically, but there must be so many things that you miss and your family. But what is really the big picture when you look back now as an American, looking back at Russia?
My parents are still back in Russia, and I miss them very much. And at the moment, I do not have an opportunity to see them,
Right.
and it doesn't make life very wonderful. I happened to be in Russia on tour performing with an orchestra in Siberia when 24th of February happened last year.
Yes. Yes.
And I lost my return ticket because all of the airlines were canceling all the flights. The air was closed above Europe, and I had to, make pretty much an escape trip through Arab Emirates for insane amount of money and
Mm.
long overs, and it was very, very scary and very
Stressful.
very, not even stressful. It was unbelievable. It's something that is so shocking and so unbelievable that you don't even like register that you feel stress or anything. You're pretty much stunned. And
Yeah.
several months I couldn't sleep very well, and was just in active disbelief of what's going on, even though I understood perfectly well what's going on. As a person who grew up in Russia, there are so many things that you are grateful for, and memories that you have as a child. And one of the main things that I'm very grateful is education, and
Mm-hmm.
especially the in-depth system of early music education that is implemented
Right.
in our country, as well as in the post-Soviet Union countries and Eastern European countries, Ukraine and Belarus, and other Moldova, and then so many other places where kids can go and study music in depth from the first grade, which makes tremendous difference.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's a huge help. And having that as part of your upbringing is making a lot of difference. There are, of course, literature and visual art and drama and theater and so many amazing things that we are proud of being associated with. But there are also many things that are despicable and difficult, especially as of lately.
Mm-hmm.
And it's and I'm sure I'm not the only person who finds themselves in this position. It is very difficult to speak about these things out loud. Having families back there and not knowing where the situation going to shift, what direction.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so it's been a very challenging time, and challenging time for families, challenging time for friends, for friendships, beliefs that are being shaped back there.
Mm-hmm.
People, stop speaking with you, and there are a lot of new experiences that came with the past year, and that most of people, I believe, wish they never had to face. So
I am so sorry.
all that we can say is we need to wait, and we need to hope that um, that common sense,
Will prevail
yeah,
at some point, and that families will be reunited without fear.
yeah,
Yeah. I hope that day comes soon, Asya.
okay.
Thank you for talking about that.
Of course.
Wow. Well, this has been some interview. So I have likened you to a goddess. Let's see, Galadriel.
Just for starters.
We've talked for about the midnight pieces and the spectacular quality of what you offer. Really, I mean, that's how I would sum this interview up. You are rather spectacular. It's not just the pieces, it's you. So I have to ask one more question. If there is one word or phrase that describes who you are from the heart, authentically, sincerely, passionately, do you know what that word would be, Asya?
I don't think one. I don't think I can come up with one word. I can maybe describe myself a little bit. I'm very hungry and curious individual,
Mm.
but it's also, there is one phrase by Franz Kafka. It's a part of his aphorisms. The aphorism goes, all of the human mistakes boil down to impatience, premature stop of being methodical, and imaginary focus on an imaginary work.
Oh, interesting.
I heard this aphorism many years ago, and I was very fascinated with it, and I eventually got myself an entire book of his aphorisms. By the way, anyone who's listening, check it out. It's incredible. But it also it inspired me to always look beyond.
Mm-hmm.
So always kind of trying to look beyond the surface, and with many and most things that we encounter in life, there's always something else and something else and something else and something else.
Mm-hmm. The layers.
The layers. And yeah, I guess I'm somebody who's always curious to yet find another door in whatever I'm doing and see what's inside.
I love that. I love that. The layers of the onion are being peeled off, and you will do that, I'm sure, until you're dying.
And it's like Narnia, like the layers never end. It's just
Exactly.
constant peeling.
Exactly. And you're discovering all the time. Wow. Well, Asiya Korepanova, you are so special. And I have to say to all my listeners, please seek her out on YouTube, especially. You must see her speaking to you. All of us, we have that option to go to this wonderful woman and hear what she has to share. And we can all satisfy our curiosity. But
Oh my,
also asiakorepanova.com, and you will see so much, everyone. I invite you. And if you're in New York City, February 21st, she will be at Merkin Hall and giving you quite splendidly and in spectacular fashion the Liszt Transcendental Etudes 24. What a night that'll be, Asiya. Listen, I want to thank you for being on center stage. You've been
thank
so
you.
incredible. And I've been glad to be part of this Asiya halo.
Oh,
So, all the best to you. To all my listeners out there, please go to centerstagewithpamelakuhn.com for more of my shows and more information about wonderful artists such as Asiya Korepanova. Thank you so much, Asiya. All right, everyone. I want you to take care of yourselves and stay well and stay safe. This is Pamela Kuhn, and the curtain is now down on Center Stage.